Welcome, everyone. You are listening to Get Out of Your Own Way with me, April Yee, on Transformation Talk Radio. Get out of your way and get what you want through transformative self-care. I'm here to support you in getting out of your own way. So, what does getting in your own way look like? Well, how about letting other people define your value and worth, ignoring your body by not taking care of yourself, and people-pleasing? These are just a few ways I've gotten in my own way. In this show, I'll share new perspectives on self-care practices so you can discover options and choices for expanding what's possible for you and your life. In each episode, I have questions for you, and when you take the time to answer them, they'll help in building up your belief about yourself. I believe that when we get good with ourselves, we get good with our lives and the world. Get Out of Your Own Way starts now. Hi, everyone. You are listening to Get Out of Your Own Way on Transformation Talk Radio, episode 22. The concepts I talk about in each episode are things I wish I learned sooner to support myself and get out of my own way. So I hope these ideas are coming to you when you need them. Today, I'm happy to have Dr. Sweta Chawla join me. And I know Sweta from the WIM program at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. We are both facilitators in that program. We both have our own groups of women that we meet with every other week throughout the year. And we have these groups for the first year that the women are in graduate school, and they can choose to continue into their second year. But I've found that it's just a really great space for women to talk about things while they're in business school that they might not have any other space to talk about. And so I'll read Dr. Sweta's bio now. So Dr. Sweta Chawla is a speaker, facilitator, and leadership coach who empowers dedicated professionals to reinvent how they work and lead for greater authenticity, balance, and impact. She supports her clients to shape their narratives on their terms, connect their brilliance to their leadership, and shift perfectionism, people-pleasing, and overworking to presence, power, and possibility by activating their authentic voice. Her background as a pharmacist and an immigrant gives her a unique understanding of the challenges diverse rising leaders face to excel at work, but often at the cost of their own joy, well-being, and fulfillment. Dr. Sweta is a Step Into Your Moxie Vocal Empowerment Certified Facilitator, author of the book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What?, and contributor to the award-winning anthology, She's Got This, essays on standing strong and moving on. She has spoken on stages and panels, including at the White House, and has been a facilitator for Hewlett-Packard and the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. So hi, Sweta. Thanks for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here, April. I can't wait to have our chat.
Yeah, and before we get into the main question, I'll be asking you, how did you decide to do what you're doing today, being a leadership coach and vocal empowerment facilitator?
Well, as you read in my bio, in my former life, I was actually a clinical pharmacist and a professor. And despite having a lot of letters behind my name, speaking in front of hundreds of people, and even leading, being a director of a clinical program, I felt like an imposter. I really didn't feel comfortable sharing my own thoughts and my ideas. So it's kind of ironic that I am a leadership coach and a vocal empowerment facilitator, because I felt far from being a leader and definitely did not feel empowered in my voice. But through a big wake up call, which I kind of allude to, like how so many people have gone through the pandemic and started to kind of rethink about how they approach work and what work means to them. I had my own wake up when my son was born premature. And I started to think about my work and my own fulfillment. And it was a whiny and twisty journey that we would probably take up the whole 26 minutes if I tell you the whole story. But essentially, I worked with a coach and realized that this is something that my brilliance is, definitely aligned with. I didn't know that there was a profession such as coaching. And I, did different things. First, I was, like a woman's coach, and then a career coach. And then I got tapped on the shoulder around leadership. And I realized that that's the best place for me to be able to really make the impact that I want to make.
Yeah. I love that you got to find that out for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the past, how have you gotten in your own way?
Well, just what you just said right now, I'm so glad that you were able to find that for yourself. One of the ways that I got in my own way was basically just following other people's agenda or
Mm.
kind of society's definitions of success, for example, or even leadership. So, like right after high school, I went through a 6-year doctor of pharmacy program.
Wow.
And I became a professor and I was in that job for a decade, but it wasn't until I started working with a coach and asking those big questions
Mm.
that I realized like I never even wanted to be a pharmacist.
Mm.
Right. So one of the big ways that I got in my way was just like not even having my own voice, like internally, forget about like externally, but just even internally, not even really knowing what I wanted, what I needed, what was important to me, what I valued, and that definitely got in my way until I started to do that more of that inner work and identify that for myself.
Yeah. And I know you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but it's like, why do you think we're so focused externally on what we should want versus like looking internally to what we actually want? And maybe in our earlier years of our lives.
I mean, I think there's several reasons, but I think it all boils down to environment. So whether that is like being an immigrant, for
Mm.
example, the culturally in the environment, I definitely got the message of, really get a strong degree and get a good job because as
Mm.
immigrants, we really value success in the form of, accolades and finances. But just also, culturally, like in the greater term, right? Society has, put on so many expectations, consciously or unconsciously, on what happiness, fulfillment, success looks, impact, leadership, all of those words, what it looks like, and schooling in the education system. I have a young child, things have definitely changed, but we're not anywhere near where I think we should be with regards to self-awareness and introspection. There's messages given to us on a daily basis through the education system, through TV, and now through social media of, what life should look like to give
Mm.
us success and happiness. And rarely do we ever get the message of, we always get, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? We don't get the question, like, what do you value? What are your passions? Where do you feel like you get energized when you're able to, do this or speak about this, et cetera. And I think we're asking the wrong questions.
Mm. Hmm. And so when you decided to become a pharmacist and you did that and a professor for over 10 years, like where was that motivation coming from? And during that time, what did you actually want to do instead if you knew?
Yeah, it's I'm almost embarrassed to say this because it's so cliche. My mother, I come from an Indian family. My mother had an arranged marriage. She was very intelligent. She wanted to go to medical school. Her family said to her no.
Mm.
And so she got a degree in chemistry and she tried to build a career out of that when we immigrated from India to the US and she couldn't.
Mm.
And it's not like it was overt in my family. Nobody said, like, you have to be a doctor, but it was always insinuated that I would go into science.
Mm.
And when I did my own kind of, and I had my wake up call and I did that inner work with my coach, I was like, oh my God, I was basically fulfilling my mom's dream. While I wasn't a doctor, I had a doctorate of pharmacy. I was called Dr. Chawla, right? And it's so
Mm.
like I said, it's embarrassing to me because it's so cliche. Like I fulfilled my mom's dream, right?
Mm.
And I'll say one other thing though. I really do believe in some ways it was like, whether you like to call it the universe or soul or destiny or whatnot, was also trying to guide me to put me on my path because never in a million years did I think I would end up in academia. And a lot of what I was doing was coaching and facilitating in my role as a professor. I thought I would, be a clinical pharmacist in a hospital or something. So in some ways, it was like I was not so far off. I still found a way to I was like on the perimeter of my purpose, but it was definitely not like the subject that I wanted to be, sharing with the world. So yeah, the influence basically came from my family and then of course the society, right? Like getting into a 6-year doctor of pharmacy program, et cetera. But I'll tell you one little, kind of sneaky little thing that I unconsciously did was my motivation at that time to go was I wanted to get out of the house. And I figured if I was in a 6-year program and it was far and away from home, I would be able to live on campus, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I had gone through a program closer to home. And that too, I didn't even realize until I did my kind of inner work that I was trying to preserve my own sense of self.
Mm. Yeah, that's really like revealing. And just the fact that, by doing what you kind of obligated yourself to do, you did see glimmers of things that actually did light you up and that you would want to pursue into the future. Like the
Yeah.
coaching aspects, the helping, guiding other people, things like that.
Yeah, you know what I realized in doing a lot of reflection, because as you know, as a coach, that a lot of what we do is reflection, because I really believe in designing based on your data.
Mm,
And oftentimes we don't know our own data, or we're not consciously, like, we're doing things, we're trying to get needs met. We're trying to make decisions based on where we really are feeling called to go, but it's not conscious. And I lived most of my life in this, what I would like to call like sideways format of like kind of getting my needs met sideways, but not even knowing that that's what I was trying to do. And it
mhm,
was in activating my authentic voice, being able to identify like, oh, that's my people pleaser making the decision, or that's my perfectionist making this decision, or my overworker. And when I was able to see that, then like it's almost like I had something to be able to locate myself, and
mm,
then I was able to, figure out, okay, well, how do I shift this so that I'm not trying to go sideways, but actually be in alignment with the thing that I'm really trying to, get a need that I'm trying to get met, or the impact that I'm trying to make.
yeah. And how did you learn to start telling yourself your truth?
Wow. That's a really powerful question. How did I learn to tell myself the truth? Well, first was in working with a coach. The coach helped me to see, it was an opportunity to I have language for this now. I didn't have language for this before,
Mhm.
but what I like to call is being witnessed.
Mm,
So oftentimes, if we're somebody who lives in, let's say, if we're not living our authentic voice, you may resonate with some of the archetypes I mentioned, the people pleaser, the perfectionist, or the overworker. We have a narrative, we have a motivation that internally, that's based on, survival, essentially, right?
mhm,
It's a coping mechanism from whatever environment that we've grown up in. And so we have an inner voice that's based on that. It's like, how do I
mhm.
stay safe, right? How do I feel like I'm enough? How do I get value? And that's where the inner voice is, and that's what's making our decisions. But through coaching, I experienced something called being witnessed,
Mm,
right? So oftentimes, again, it's in the background, but we don't really have a space to be able to say, like, this is what's going on in my mind, and this is what my motivation is. We don't have time to reflect on that because we're always moving forward. And sometimes we don't always see value in reflecting, right? Because what is that going to do? That's what I love about coaching, is that we reflect for the purposes of going forward.
mhm,
And so by working with the coach, I finally had time to notice, like, this is my motivation. This is what my inner talk is like, my inner voice is. And I was able to, again, uh, kind of get awareness around through, inquiry, because that's what a coach does, right? Like, wow, I was bullied when I was younger, and I
mm,
had such a deep sense of not feeling safe, and that's where my people pleaser came from. She's always trying to make sure I don't get rejected, right? So
yeah.
that's where the perfectionist comes on too, because if I say the right thing, then I won't be rejected, right?
Mm,
And if it's, I don't feel valuable enough, if I work really, really hard, nobody can tell me that I'm not like doing enough, right? Or I get love and appreciation for when I perform well, right? And I don't feel loved. So so just even like having space to identify the
mhm,
source, what's going on, right? What are the thoughts? Where is it coming from? And what's the source of it? Was the first step. So even before changing anything about how I voiced myself externally, that was the first place. Was just a lot of reflection, a lot of self-awareness. That isn't always easy to do because, like I said, our systems don't set us up for that. And that's why I feel working with a coach is so valuable.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, sometimes even if it's a little bit painful and our lives are quote unquote miserable. It's like we're familiar with that and being in that place. And then changing takes a lot of effort and energy and work and can also be painful. And so it's almost like, are we going to choose the familiar pain or go through the discomfort? And it could be really uncomfortable of changing, but creating a life and ourselves the way that we want to.
That is such a good point, and it's 1000% true. Our brains are designed to keep us safe, right? To protect us.
Mhm.
And so familiar comes from the word family, right?
Mhm.
So if even if like if there's dysfunction, it's like, okay, this sucks, but I know how to navigate this. The brain doesn't like unfamiliar. And
Mhm.
so we get, and this can show up somatically. Like whenever I'm changing, I start to get like headaches and things like that. And so a lot of even in the vocal empowerment facilitation that I do, a big part of what's unique about that program is why I got certified is that we don't call these feelings fear or self-sabotage. We call them sensation, not really to put so much. It's normal to feel uncomfortable, and I think there's this like unconscious narrative out there that somehow discomfort is bad,
Mhm.
right? And that really works against us because if our aim is comfort, then we never grow. But part of
Yeah.
growth is change. And so if we can see change, if we can see uncertainty as what I like to call the place of possibility, and
Mhm.
we get the tools and support, it's makes such a big difference because and in this I talk about this a lot in my workshops is that like and this is why coach is so helpful because we know that this is what's going to happen and we
Yeah.
have the tools and we have the way to support you, but if you try to do this on your own you may never make the change or you can take years to do the change or like decades. But if you it's like ripping off the band-aid, you know that this is going to be it's going to hurt, but if we do it quickly, then oof, there's relief, right? Or we can
Mhm.
drag it out and and it's like we could go, oh, we could peel it off. No, I'm going to put it back on. We can peel it off. We can put it back on. And then it's like, okay, we get inspired, but then the fear, the sensations hold us back and we never really make that forward movement. But when we realize this is just actually part of the process, it's like giving birth, right? It's going to be it can be very painful, it can be really intense, but this beautiful new life comes out on the other end. And that's kind of like how what I like to equate kind of doing this reinvention work basically around.
Yeah. And speaking of the reinvention work, I know you've like created some tools for yourself that you used and then you use with your clients now. Would you be open to sharing one or two of them with
Yeah,
us?
absolutely. I think again, having language for the things that a lot of us are experiencing. So, like example, the archetypes and being able to locate ourselves and say, okay, I'm showing up as the people pleaser. Showing up as the perfectionist or the overworker. Um, is very helpful because two things. It helps us to know, like, okay, identify ourselves. But then if we have a tool, which is so I created this empowered decision matrix, which we'll put the like I think you'll put the link in the
In the
but
show notes.
my
Yeah.
website slash matrix. And I have essentially, because one of the things I often find people come to me is that the thing that holds them back is lack of clarity, right?
Mm.
Or not knowing how to move forward. And it's usually because one of these archetypes are showing up to kind of protect us, right? So I think we always know what the answers are. We know what we need, we know what we want. But again, these archetypes stop that to try to protect us for, again, rejection, et cetera, fear of failure. But so my matrix, which they can download, has some questions to those specific archetypes, so that it can help you to identify if your kind of inner voice, your the inner talk that's holding you back, which one is it, and then what's a more empowering question to ask to help you to get to that answer. Um,
Mm.
so they can download that, and it's a great like tool and simple that you can just print out or have with you. And anytime you feel like you need to make a decision, whether it's a big one or a small one, bring it out, and that's the first step to that self-awareness that helps you to come to your authenticity, and then you can bring that authenticity outwards through your voice.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to seeing that matrix. That sounds really helpful. And I love that you said it helps you choose a more empowering question because I think like, we're used to asking ourselves questions like that are disempowering or unhelpful, like, oh, what's wrong with me? It's like we're never going to get good responses if the question is what's wrong with me,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so I'm curious, like, what could be one more empowering question? If let's say our people pleaser is coming out, like,
Mhm.
what's an empowering question we can ask about in that situation?
So one of the most empowering questions, it might not seem empowering, right? But it's like, whose opinion am I considering in this decision?
Ooh.
Right? Because oftentimes people pleasing is it's afraid of rejection or rocking the boat, right? So when we're able to, I think anything that offers data, your data is empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then, from that, when you get that, information, then it helps you. Then the next question would be like, what is my true value? What are
Mm-hmm.
my values and what decision would I make that would really honor that value? So a lot of in coaching, one of the classic exercises is identify your values. And
Yeah.
I have a unique way of doing it because I do think values led decision making and leadership and just lifing is really powerful. But oftentimes, and I've had many clients tell me they've done value exercises, like you pick words from a list. They tend to be aspirational values, not genuine values. And so I
Mm,
have a unique process where I take people through their own kind of stories to be able to really draw out what's a true value. And that's like a blueprint, right? So when you have this question of, okay, well, whose opinion and then what do I really value? And is there a way that my value can honor both people? Because I really think that people pleasing is, they say like no is a complete sentence, but I think people pleasers are people persons. And I think that's a
mm, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So it's like we want to include other people. We want to connect with other people. I think it's part of the value. Usually, like one of my top values is connection. So if you tell me
Mhm.
like, no, no, like it feels mean to me, right? I want to know how to be inclusive. So then there comes the like, well, maybe is there a value that can really honor both of us? And then let's say there isn't, or maybe there's a values conflict. Maybe you
Mm,
have two values, or your value conflicts with their value, right? Again, being able to even name that. And
yeah.
then the third piece of it, and this is kind of, I think, a more advanced coaching skill, and it's part of the perfectionism, which is, do I have black and white thinking, right? Is
Mm,
there an either or? Are there solutions that are creative? Your creative brain can come up with solutions that we maybe never even thought of. That might not be the perfect solution for both people, but it might create a possibility where you're honoring both values, right? And so this is kind of like high level. I like to contextualize it. And when we're working with clients, really make it more tangible. But I think in that download, on that page where you download it, there's a podcast interview that I specifically did on this matrix. So they can kind of hear some
ooh.
nuances around this because this is it's a nuanced skill, right? And that's to me what leadership is about, is being able to navigate nuance, and it's skills that we're not really ever taught.
Hmm.
Right. So
Hmm.
hopefully this tool can kind of offer some support around that.
Wow. That sounds like a really powerful tool. And I'm so glad you're willing to like share it with this audience.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you for that. And I'm curious, so, what does your life look like now that you have been using your authentic voice?
Wow. It's amazing. It's from the small to the big, right? So I'm a public speaker now. So I'm actually on stage, on podcasts, on, doing various things where I'm sharing what I want to be talking about. So I was able to do those things before when I was a professor, but I was, talking about drugs, right?
Mhm.
To be able to talk about like topics like what we're talking about today, to me is like what a gift, that I can really be able to use my own experience of getting in my own way, but not sharing my voice, and to be able to help others and shorten that kind of learning curve and for others. But just even on the day to day, like I used to be someone who was like, what did you think about that movie? Or what do you want to eat? And I would be like, I don't know. I don't, I couldn't
Mm,
even answer that question. And now it's like I have so much more self-intimacy and ability to be able to say that doesn't actually work for me, or I would really like this, or I know you want this and I want this, like how can we create something where both of us get to have our needs met? Like
mm.
that possibility wasn't even available to me before.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that too. It's almost like, I mean, that is like pure people pleasing, right? Like not knowing what we want because we're so focused on what others might want. Like we don't even know. And so we're like asking them to find out what they want, and then we'll just go along with what they want. And so a lot of my clients also, when I ask them questions about what they want to do or what they want in their lives, they don't know because they've been so focused on other people's wants, right?
Exactly. And that was me for the forever, like for the longest time. And I still struggle with it. Like every
Mm,
year, it's like, but I also realize there's a process to it. So I think it's a muscle that gets built up. And
mm,
I mean, I genuinely remember the moment that I was in a car with somebody and we were going to get chai like in the middle of the night. And it was at a taxi stand in New York City, right? And there's all these like older Indian men taxi cab drivers, and I'm wearing a skirt. And, he asked me, do you want to come in? And I looked at my skirt, I looked at the time, and I was doing this mental, like, I shouldn't, right? Because a lot of people
mm,
pleasing is should. And I was like, do you think I should? Like I asked him, do you think I should go in? Right. And he with such genuineness was like, I don't know. What do you want? And it was
mm,
like, it felt like nobody had ever asked me that question before and meant it.
mm.
And that was so pivotal for me, right? And I think if you're somebody who can't answer that question, don't stop asking yourself. Because if you now have this, like, I'm actually open to the answer of that, it will come. It will come.
Yeah.
It's a muscle that you practice. Start small. Start with, you got a bunch of crayons and you're about to color something. What color do I want? Don't say whichever. Actually answer the question.
Yes.
When you go to
Yes.
lunch, somebody says, what do you want to eat? Don't say whatever. Just pause and actually say, what would be the most yummiest thing on here that I want to eat? Start small, and it's a muscle that you build. And before you know it, you're going to feel confident making big decisions, both in work and in life.
Oh, wow. That is really powerful. And it sounds like the message today is take small steps to start practicing using your authentic voice and finding what's like your truth and what's true for you.
Yeah. And you can just again start with your inner voice. If you're not at the point where you're able to eat, like, because you're so in a protective mode, that's okay. Really be kind with yourself and say, I'm going to tell myself the truth. I'm not ready to maybe say it out loud, but just get that in, ask that question to yourself. What is your truth in as many situations as possible? Write it down, then maybe share it in a safe place before
Mm.
you go out and kind of share it with the world or with people who are, the people you people please with.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about this so much longer, but thank you so much, Sweta, for being here today.
You're so welcome.
And thanks to those of you listening. I'm so glad you joined me for this episode of Get Out of Your Own Way. To go even deeper, join me for Self Care Sundays, monthly drop in sessions, and you can find more about that at thehealingmodalities.com. And you can also sign up for my weekly Self Care Seeds newsletter there. And like we mentioned today, all of Dr. Sweta's stuff we'll share in the show notes so you can access that matrix on her website. And join me again for Get Out of Your Own Way every other Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central, and 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. Next time on Get Out of Your Own Way, I'll have another guest join me to talk about how they've gotten in and out of their own way. So until next time, have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. You have been listening to Get Out of Your Own Way. Get out of your way and get what you want through transformative self-care with me, April Yee. Tune in every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. In each episode, I present new questions that support you in building up your beliefs about yourself. To connect with me or for more information, you can email me at thehealingmodalities@gmail.com or visit my website, thehealingmodalities.com. See you soon.